Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced in a speech that the government could be considering a major step to break the nexus between pharmaceutical companies and doctors pushing expensive branded medicines. He said basically that the government will soon put in place a legal framework to ensure doctors prescribe low-cost generic medicines. We're now joined by Mr. Kewal Handa, the former MD of Pfizer, and Chaturya Aggarwal, Pharma Analyst at IDBI Capital, to discuss exactly this. Hi, Mr. Handa, as well as Chaturya. Thank you very much for joining in. Mr. Handa, I want to start with you. What is the likelihood of this actually coming about from the government stable, that all of the drugs which will be prescribed by doctors will be generic names and not branded names? What's the possibility?
So, in globally, let's say in countries like US, there is patented products and there are generic products. There's nothing called branded generics, which we have in India. It came out of because there were no patents in this country. Now, there is a difference between how generic in US is being treated and how generic in India is being treated. In India, we have three categories now: patented products, branded generics, and generic generics. The major portion, 95% of the business, is today in branded generic. There's only 1% is patented and just 4% is in generic. Now, we want to move the entire thing upside down and say that 95% should be generic. In US, if you want to have a generic, you have to have a plant which is as good as the plant of a proprietary company. It has to be inspected, it has to be audited, and it has to follow all the GMPs. I don't think so we have that infrastructure in this country today.
Sir, so exactly, I just want to take that point forward, because tomorrow if a patient does get a prescription from a doctor and goes to a pharmacy, it could actually get any drug where the quality might not be controlled. So hence, from that perspective, do you think that this particular proposition by the government is probably going to come with multiple caveats, or is just going to take longer to implement?
I think that first thing the government has to set is the align or manufacturing with PICS, which we are, reluctant to. So we should be first aligned to a global manufacturing practices, even before thinking about generic. Today, a generic plant and a branded generic plant, there is a difference. You go to a generic plant and to a branded generic plant, there's difference. The type of inputs a generic uses and a branded generic uses, there is a difference. The excipients that are being used is a difference. The quality is going to be a dramatically different, and doctors will have absolutely no confidence in the generic product, and they will take no responsibility for the patient's care. That's my biggest challenge today. Is we are moving from doctors' control to the hands of retailers and e-commerce, which is the biggest risk we are taking.
Mr. Handa, hi. Good morning, Prashant here.
Good morning, Prashant.
Sir, so generic is essentially, you said branded generic and generic. Should there be, in theory, any difference between these two? I mean, a branded generic is a generic in a, in a packing of a company, right? I mean, in theory, that is the way it should be.
Yes, and this is the normal understanding that a branded generic and a generic should be same. Yes. But is it the same? That's the question that I'm asking.
So can't it be done at a factory level? I mean, and if you could also clarify for our viewers, who makes these generics? I mean, do the Suns, Lupins, etc. make these drugs as well, the generics?
Okay, now that's a good question. A is first we need to actually have laws which are as aligned to global laws for quality. Therefore, I said we need to have aligned to PICS law first. Most of the countries are getting aligned to PICS. B, we need to have a culture of audit of the plants and closure of the plants if the failure to comply with the quality. That is very, very important, even before we take a step to move to generic. Now, your next question is, does Sun or Ciplus have generic? They do have. It's very unfortunate that they have a branded generics and they also have generic business. But there are differences. In case of generic business, they sell directly to the retailer, giving them hefty margins of 40 to 50%. Whereas in branded generic, they sell through doctors.
Okay. We have Chaturya with us as well. Chaturya, Indian pharma market right now is worth around $16 billion roughly. Your sense in terms of whether this would completely change the dynamics of the domestic market and big domestic companies as well?
Hi. Good question. The thing is, as even Sir mentioned, that whether this whole business will shift to a generic business is still a very big question mark. I do understand that Medical Council of India in October 2016 had said that all physicians across India have to necessarily write a generic name in the drugs when they are doing prescriptions. But this has currently been followed by the government doctors, but still there is a held back by the private doctors because there is a distinction which is still, the thing is, when you are writing a salt name, vis-a-vis where you are writing a branded generic name, and 95% of the proportion is into the branded generic name, the recall value is faster. The companies are selling on both the basis. Obviously, the recall value of the brand is stronger. So to shift the whole business from a branded generic to a generic is certainly a longer time to happen. I'm not saying it cannot happen, but I feel that it will take a very long time for that to happen.
Okay, that point is taken. Chaturya, we're running out of time. So just before that, I wanted to pose a quick question to Mr. Handa. So it seems as though the repercussions would be also in terms of two parts, which I want to ask you. One, whether the power would shift straight to the pharmacy, whether companies are just going to negotiate directly with the pharmacists and tell them to prescribe or, give their drug despite whatever the generic name would be. One, what is the probability of that happening? And two, there would be multiple, medical reps who might actually face unemployment if in case this happens. So do you think that there'll be opposition on that front?
So there are two things. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The power will shift from doctors to retailers or to the e-commerce guys if e-commerce is opened up. And the risk there is those will push only products which give them highest margin and not a quality product at retailer. Let me make that point very clear. A retailer would be only looking for his highest margin to sell a generic product. Over a longer period of time, it will have no impact on prices because slowly everybody will start giving this and the prices will start rising up. That is one. You already have a price control. And under the price control, how do you want to reduce the prices? By moving the power of center from doctors to retailers? That's ridiculous. You already have a price control, so what do you want to do more? I think a better way of looking at it is the universal healthcare, where the biggest challenge is, and government is not addressing that challenge. Your second point was, what was your second point?
MRs, medical.
Oh yeah, MRs. Well, of course, MRs. Every company has around about 5,000 to 6,000 MRs. Instead of MRs, perhaps you may just require brokers to broker deals with retailers for sale of goods. So definitely there would be no science, no knowledge, and all that product will be sold like a commodity. You are commoditizing the entire pharmaceutical industry, which is not fair.
Right, fair enough. Mr. Handa, just one last brief sort of question. For the manufacturer, like Sun, for example, I'm just using that as an example. The cost of producing a branded generic and a generic is the same? I mean...
should be the same.
Should be the same,
If they give the same quality, same input, same excipients, it should be the same.
It should be the same. So it's just about...
Except that if it is manufactured in a plant which is US FDA plant or PICS approval, the cost is higher. If it is manufactured in some other plant which has local approval, the cost may be lower.
Okay, all right, fair enough. We'll leave it there. Mr. Handa, Chaturya, appreciate both of you joining in with that perspective. So, I mean, I think the last word certainly hasn't been said. Mr. Handa making an important point that, well, generics, you can